The dawn came red over the Arizona plains, spilling across the land like fire. The McAllister ranch sat quiet in the half-light, too quiet. For days, cattle had been vanishing, trails leading off into the dry canyons where the Apache were known to roam. Clara McAllister had heard her father curse their name more than once, but she'd also heard something else in his voice: fear. She saddled her chestnut mare before the men stirred, her braid tied tight, rifle across her lap. She wasn't meant to ride out. Her father forbade it. But Clara had inherited his temper, not his patience. If the thieves thought they could steal from the McAllisters and go unseen, she'd prove them wrong. The desert was still cool when she reached the first canyon ridge. Her mare's hooves crunched on stone. Hawks circled overhead. Clara dismounted to study the tracks. Not cattle. Horses, maybe 5 or 6, and light-footed. She crouched low, tracing the marks with her fingers. Someone had been driving stolen stock north through the rocks. Then she heard it, the soft shift of pebbles behind her. Clara spun, rifle raised. A tall figure stood just yards away, silent as shadow. The man's skin gleamed bronze in the early light, his dark hair bound with leather, a rifle slung across his back. His eyes, sharp and unreadable, met hers without a word. "Step back," she ordered, voice steady, though her heart hammered. He didn't move. I said. Before she finished, he was on her. The rifle flew from her hands, landing in the dust. He moved with a predator's grace, faster than she'd ever seen. She tried to pull her knife, but his hand closed around her wrist. His grip was firm, not cruel. "Let me go," she spat. The man tilted his head, studying her as though she were some wild creature he hadn't decided whether to kill or free. "You ride alone," he said, his English thick but clear. Foolish, Clara jerked against his hold. "You have no right." He stepped closer until the scent of smoke and dust filled her lungs. "Your people took from mine," he said quietly. "Now I take from yours." She froze. "You're Apache. I am Taza." His gaze didn't waver. "You'll come with me. Not without a fight. You already fought," and he was right. Her breath came hard, her strength nearly spent. He bound her wrist with a leather cord, not roughly, but in a way that told her escape wouldn't come easy. Then with a low whistle he called his horse, a paint stallion with eyes like black glass. Clara was lifted onto the saddle before she could resist. Taza mounted behind her, his arm firm around her waist as the horse leapt forward. The desert blurred past in streaks of gold and crimson. She twisted to look up at him. "My father will come for me." "He already came," Taza said. "And men died." The word struck like a bullet. She wanted to believe he was lying, but his eyes, dark, mournful, held no cruelty, only truth. The wind whipped her hair as they rode deeper into the wild lands where no rancher dared follow. The morning sun rose higher, turning the red earth to flame. She could feel his heartbeat steady against her back, and it frightened her more than the capture itself. "You'll endure this," he murmured near her ear, voice low as thunder. "And me." Clara shut her eyes, fighting tears of rage, and something she didn't yet understand. The land stretched endless before them, unforgiving and untamed, and she knew her life as the rancher's daughter had just ended at dawn. The sun climbed higher, burning white against the endless sky. By mid-morning, the cool air of dawn had vanished, replaced by waves of heat that shimmered across the desert floor. Clara McAllister's lips had cracked, her throat dry as dust. The leather cords around her wrist bit into her skin, but she refused to let Taza see her weakness. They had been riding for hours, crossing ground she barely recognized, dry riverbeds, thorny mesquite, and canyons that opened like scars in the earth. The land seemed alive, whispering with wind and the distant cry of hawks. Every sound felt sharper, crueler. At last Taza slowed his horse and dismounted. He said something in Apache to the animal, which lowered its head obediently. Then he turned to her. "We walk," he said simply. Her heart sank. "Walk in this heat? You want to live? Then walk." He cut her bindings, but only to tie a new rope loosely around her wrists, leading it like a tether. She glared at him. "You think I'll run?" "I know you will," he said. "So I stay close." Clara stumbled beside him as they moved through the sand, her boots sinking with each step. The heat pressed on her shoulders like a heavy hand. Sweat stung her eyes, but she didn't beg for rest. She'd rather collapse than give him the satisfaction. Taza walked in silence, his movements fluid and certain. He seemed untouched by the sun, his stride even, his breathing steady. She hated him for it. hated how calm he looked while she fought not to fall. When she finally tripped over a rock, she hit the ground hard, choking on dust. "Enough," he said, stopping. He crouched beside her, his shadow falling over her face. "You fight the earth. You will lose." "Maybe I want to lose," she muttered. He frowned slightly, then unhooked a leather pouch from his belt and held it out. "Drink." Clara turned her head away. "Not from you." He let out a breath through his nose, almost a sigh. "You'd rather die proud? Better that than die trusting you." For a long moment he said nothing. Then, without warning, he lifted the pouch and poured a trickle of water into his palm. He brought it to her lips gently, almost like one might feed a wounded animal. Despite herself, her mouth opened and she drank. The water was warm, but it felt like life itself. When she was done, she looked up at him, expecting a smirk or some cruel remark. Instead, he was watching her quietly, as if trying to understand something about her. "Why are you doing this?" she demanded. "If you wanted me dead, you could have left me." He stood looking out across the horizon. "You are not meant to die," he said. "You are meant to see." "See what?" "What your people did, what mine lost." His voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. As they walked again, Clara studied him from behind, the strong lines of his shoulders, the way he carried himself like a man carved from the land itself. He was unlike any man she'd ever known, disciplined, watchful, dangerous, and yet not cruel. The sky burned orange as evening fell. When they finally stopped near a dry creek bed, Taza built a small fire without a word. He tossed her a blanket and said, "Sleep, tomorrow we go farther." Clara curled up on the hard ground, too tired to argue. She watched him across the flames, his face caught in shifting light and shadow. She didn't understand him. This man who could steal her freedom and still offer her water, who spoke of justice with eyes that held sorrow. As she drifted toward sleep, one thought haunted her more than fear. She was beginning to want to understand him. The Apache camp came into view just as the sun slipped behind the mountains. Smoke rose in thin trails, the smell of wood and roasted maize filling the air. Clara's legs trembled from exhaustion, but she held her head high. She wouldn't let them see fear, no matter what awaited her. Taza rode ahead, his posture straight and unyielding. Children stopped their play to stare. Women paused at their fires, murmuring to one another. Warriors emerged from the shadows, their faces painted with ochre and ash. Clara felt every pair of eyes on her, some curious, some cold, some openly hostile. "White woman," one of them said, sneering. "Spoil of war?" Taza dismounted and answered in Apache, his tone sharp. The other warrior stepped back, but not before giving Clara a look that chilled her. She caught only one word that she recognized, "Chindi," meaning ghost. Taza turned to her. "Do not speak unless I tell you," he warned. "I wasn't planning to," she shot back. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He led her through the camp toward a large fire at its center. The chieftain, an older man with silver streaking his black hair, rose to meet them. The two men spoke in low tones, firm, tense, and filled with meaning Clara couldn't understand. When they finished, the chief's gaze swept over her, assessing like a hawk. "Your father," Taza said, turning to her, "took our horses, our land, and our peace. Until that is righted, you stay here. So I'm your prisoner?" she said bitterly. His eyes met hers, calm and dark. "No, you are my proof." A murmur spread through the onlookers. Clara's cheeks burned. Proof? Proof of what? That he could steal from her family as easily as her father had from his? That night, they placed her near the edge of the camp, guarded but not chained. Someone tossed her a bowl of food, beans, corn, and a strip of dried meat. She ate in silence, her eyes scanning the flickering circle of light. Across the fire, she saw Taza speaking to the elders. His voice was low, respectful. He looked nothing like a kidnapper. He looked like a man carrying a burden too heavy for one soul. When his gaze finally met hers across the firelight, Clara looked away first. Later, when the camp had gone quiet, a young Apache woman approached her. She knelt and said softly, "They call you the White Flame. Because you do not bow," Clara frowned. "I'm not a flame. I'm just trying to survive." The woman smiled faintly. "Flames survive by burning." Then she was gone. The night grew colder. Clara pulled the blanket around her shoulders and stared at the stars. Bright, endless, merciless. She thought of her father and the men who might be searching for her, and a strange mix of anger and doubt filled her chest. Had her father truly taken what didn't belong to him? Was Taza's vengeance the price of that sin? She heard footsteps behind her and turned sharply. Taza stood there, silent as always. "You should sleep," he said. "I will when I'm not surrounded by people who hate me." "They do not hate you," he said after a pause. "They hate what you come from." "And what do you think of me?" she asked before she could stop herself. He looked at her a long time. The firelight caught in his eyes, turning them to molten gold. "I think," he said slowly, "you are stronger than you know. But pride will hurt you here." "Then I guess we'll both be hurting," she muttered. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Maybe." Then he turned and walked away into the darkness, leaving her with the crackle of fire, the whisper of wind, and the strange, unsettling warmth of his words. For the first time since her capture, Clara realized she wasn't simply enduring. She was changing, and that frightened her most of all. Morning broke pale and gray over the Apache camp. The night's chill clung to the air, and a thin mist rose from the nearby creek. Clara stirred from uneasy sleep, the blanket damp and her body sore from the hard ground. Around her, the camp was already alive. Women tending fires, men preparing horses, children laughing as they ran between the shelters. Life moved on, indifferent to her presence. Taza stood near the fires, sharpening a knife with long, steady strokes. Clara watched him, uncertain whether to speak or stay silent. His movements were calm, practiced, but there was something distant in his expression, as if his mind were miles away. She rose, brushing the dust from her skirt, and walked toward him. The guards glanced at her, but didn't stop her this time. "You plan to keep me here forever?" she asked. He didn't look up. "Forever is not long in the desert," he said, still working the blade. "That's not an answer." He finally met her eyes. "When your father makes right what he broke, you go free." Clara crossed her arms. "And if he doesn't?" Taza paused, then slid the knife into its sheath. "Then you learn to live here." Before she could respond, a sudden shout came from the far edge of camp. Several warriors were returning from a hunt, dragging 2 deer behind them and something else. One of them, a broad-shouldered man with scars across his chest, pushed a captive boy ahead of him, no older than 15. The boy's clothes marked him as a ranch hand, probably one of her father's workers. Clara's stomach twisted. The warrior threw the boy to the ground near the fire. "He was stealing from our traps," he barked in Apache. "We should hang him." The men around the fire murmured approval. The boy trembled, his face pale with fear. Clara took a step forward. "He's just a boy," she said. "He didn't mean—" "Stay back," Taza ordered. "No," she cried. "You can't just—" The scarred warrior rounded on her, fury in his eyes. "This woman speaks too much," he snarled. "Let her watch what happens when a thief is caught." Before anyone could stop him, he grabbed the boy by the collar and drew his knife. Clara lunged instinctively, but Taza was faster. In one fluid motion, he caught the man's wrist and twisted. The knife clattered to the ground. "Enough," Taza said, his voice low but thunderous. The warrior glared at him. "You defend her people now?" "I defend honor," Taza said evenly. "Not cruelty." A tense silence fell. Then slowly the other warrior stepped back. Taza turned to Clara. "Take the boy. He will leave when the sun is low." The boy scrambled to his feet, whispering a shaky thanks. Clara met Taza's eyes, her anger tempered by surprise. "Why did you stop him?" she asked softly once the others drifted away. He looked at her for a long moment. "Because I know what it is to lose someone who cannot fight back." Clara swallowed hard. There was something raw in his tone, something that made her chest tighten. "Your family?" she asked quietly. He didn't answer. His gaze turned to the horizon, distant and heavy. "Go," he said. "Help the boy. He will need food for the road." She did as he said, but her thoughts stayed on him. The man she had called savage had just risked angering his own warriors to save a frightened child. That night, when the campfire glowed low, she caught Taza's eye again. He gave a slight nod, nothing more. But to Clara, it felt like the start of something fragile, something human between 2 people raised to hate each other. And though she wouldn't admit it even to herself, that quiet act of mercy changed everything. At the McAllister Ranch, the days since Clara's disappearance had hardened into weeks. Dust gathered on her empty chair at supper. Her father, John McAllister, spoke little now. His once booming voice turned to gravel. Every sunrise, riders went out searching, and every sundown they returned with nothing but empty saddles and bowed heads. Rumors spread fast across the territory. Some said the Apaches had taken her north to trade her, others that she was dead. John refused to believe any of it. "My girl's out there," he growled to his foreman, "and she's waiting for me to bring her home." He gathered his men, ranch hands, neighboring settlers, even a few hired guns, and they rode hard into Apache country. They didn't wait for the army, didn't care about treaties or boundaries. The law meant little when blood was involved. By the time they reached the borderlands, word of their movement had already reached Taza's camp. Taza stood at the edge of a cliff, scanning the horizon. The wind carried the scent of smoke, a rancher's fire too close for peace. His jaw clenched. He had expected this. Men like John McAllister didn't accept loss quietly. Behind him, Clara approached, her hair tied back with a strip of leather, her skirt dusty, her face tanned from sun. She had learned to move more quietly now, her steps sure even on the uneven rock. "What is it?" she asked. "Your father," Taza said without turning. "He comes with men, many guns." Her stomach dropped. "Then you have to leave. Move the camp before they find it." He shook his head. "If we run, they will follow. If we fight, they will die. Either way, the blood falls on this land again." Clara stepped closer. "Then let me talk to him. I can make him stop." Taza finally looked at her, his eyes dark with both admiration and doubt. "He will not listen. His pride is like yours. I don't care," she said fiercely. "He's my father. He'll listen to me." Taza said nothing for a moment. The wind tugged at his hair. "You would stand between him and me?" "If it means no one else dies, yes." He studied her face, searching for deceit but found none. "You speak like one of my people now," he said quietly. That night, the Apache camp moved higher into the canyons, preparing for the possibility of battle. Clara watched as men painted their faces and sharpened their weapons while women packed food and gathered children. Every action was calm, purposeful, a people long accustomed to loss. When the fires burned low, Taza came to her with a horse. "If I fall tomorrow," he said, "you ride west until you see the cottonwoods. There is a river. Follow it. It will lead you to safety." "I'm not leaving," she said. "Not until this ends." He looked at her, then nodded slowly. "Then it ends together." At dawn, the riders came, dust rising behind them like a storm. Clara saw her father at their head, rifle in hand, his eyes wild and weary. When he spotted her standing beside Taza, his face went white. "Clara!" he shouted. "Get away from him!" She took a step forward. "Pa, stop! You don't understand. Don't you speak for him!" he roared. "He's got your mind twisted." Taza didn't raise his weapon, but his warriors had theirs ready. One wrong move would bring death from both sides. "Please," Clara begged. "It doesn't have to be this way." John's gaze flicked between her and Taza, torn between rage and disbelief. "You're coming home, girl," he said. "Even if I have to burn this valley to do it." The words hung heavy in the air. Clara felt the ground shift beneath her, one step closer to war. And in that moment, she knew the next move, whatever it was, could destroy both her worlds forever. The first shots never came. Both sides held still, dust rising in the charged silence between them. Clara could hear her own heartbeat pounding like hoofbeats in her chest. Taza stood motionless beside her, every muscle coiled, his hand resting lightly near his rifle, but not on it. "Tell him to stand down," Clara whispered. "I do," Taza murmured back. "But words are wind to men who fear." Her father's voice broke the stillness. "Clara, come here now. We'll handle this our way." She shook her head. "Your way brings more graves." One of the ranch hands spat into the dirt. "She's gone soft, John. Apaches turned her." That was enough to spark the fire. Several riders moved forward, rifles raising. But before a single shot rang out, Taza raised his arm high and called something in Apache, a command sharp as thunder. His warriors stepped back, lowering their weapons. Then he looked at her father and shouted in English, "We do not want your blood. Leave this place." The words carried across the valley, powerful and clear. For a moment, it seemed to work. John hesitated, eyes darting from his daughter to the warriors behind Taza. Then, slowly, he turned his horse. But peace is a fragile thing in the desert. A single nervous ranch hand, just a boy, barely 20, fired his gun. The crack echoed through the canyon like a curse. The bullet missed Taza, but grazed another warrior's arm. The Apache roared in fury. In an instant, chaos exploded. Clara screamed as Taza pulled her down behind a rock, shielding her from flying bullets. She could hear the whine of lead and the shouts of men. "No!" she cried. "Stop! Stop!" Taza shouted orders in Apache. His warriors didn't charge. They only fired warning shots, driving the ranchers back without killing. It was mercy born of control, not weakness. Within minutes, the ranchers retreated, dragging their wounded with them. When the last echo faded, Clara found herself trembling in the hollow of Taza's arms. He released her slowly, his face dark with fury and grief. "Now you see," he said, "war always waits for men like your father. The land remembers blood, even when we try to forget." Clara's voice shook. "He didn't mean... he meant every bullet," Taza said bitterly. Then, seeing her pale face, he softened. "You should not have stood between us." "I had to," she whispered. He studied her, eyes searching. "You learn the desert, you learn the truth. It kills what is weak but teaches what must endure." That evening, as the camp settled from the chaos, Clara walked to the creek where the water glimmered under the setting sun. Her reflection stared back at her, dusty, weary, yet changed. Taza approached quietly, carrying a strip of leather and a small clay bowl. "You move like a deer now," he said. "I had a good teacher," she replied, though her voice carried a hint of sadness. He crouched beside her. "You wish to understand the desert? Then you must feel it. The way the wind cuts, the way it hides water where none should be." He dipped his fingers into the bowl and drew a faint mark of red earth across her palm. "This is what my people teach our children. The earth gives, the earth takes, but it always watches." Clara looked at the mark. "And what does it see in me?" "A heart learning to belong to two worlds," he said. Their eyes met, the tension between them quiet but deep. The hatred that had first brought them together was gone, replaced by something fragile and unspoken. As the desert cooled around them, Clara realized that she was no longer a captive. She was a student of the land, of its silence, and of the man who lived by its law. And though the night came soft and full of stars, she knew the storm between their peoples was only beginning. The moon rose wide and silver over the desert, its light spreading like spilled milk across the sand. The Apache camp slept lightly, the silence broken only by the soft whinny of horses and the crackle of the dying fire. Clara couldn't sleep. The air felt too heavy, the memory of gunfire still ringing faintly in her ears. She stood and stepped out of her shelter, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. The night was cold, sharp, and endless. Somewhere beyond the dark ridges, her father's men would be tending their wounds and likely planning their revenge. Taza was sitting by the fire, sharpening an arrowhead. The flames carved shadows along his face, catching the lines of weariness beneath his calm. He didn't look up when she approached. "The desert doesn't rest," he said quietly. "Neither do you." "I can't," Clara admitted. "Every time I close my eyes, I see my father's face. I hear the shots. I can't make it stop." He glanced at her then, his eyes softened by the firelight. "You tried to stop what men have carried in their hearts for too long. That is not weakness." Clara sank down across from him, the fire between them flickering low. "Your people must hate me for what happened. They hate no one more than the men who break peace and hide behind family names," Taza said. They see you trying." For a long moment neither spoke. The desert wind sighed through the camp, stirring the ashes. Then from the shadows came a new sound, footsteps slow and deliberate. A warrior emerged, tall and broad, his chest marked with white paint. It was Kosa, the same man who had nearly killed the boy weeks before. His eyes burned like coals as he looked from Taza to Clara. "This woman brings death," Kosa said in Apache, his voice rough with anger. "Her people will come again. You shame us by protecting her." Taza rose to his feet, bow in hand, though the arrow remained unstrung. I protect what is right, he said firmly. Kosa spat at the ground. Then fight for it. The camp stirred awake, men emerging from their shelters to watch. The two warriors faced each other, moonlight glinting off steel. Clara's heart pounded. Taza, don't, she whispered. Please. But honor was already at stake. Kosa lunged first, swinging his knife. Taza sidestepped, caught the man's wrist, and drove his shoulder into his chest. They crashed to the ground, rolling in the dust. The crowd shouted in Apache, some cheering, others calling for peace. Taza gained the upper hand, pinning Kosa down. You will not decide my honor, he growled. Kosa's eyes blazed. Then let the spirits judge. He struck again, slicing across Taza's arm. Blood spattered the dirt. Taza retaliated, knocking the knife away and pressing his forearm across Kosa's throat. The fight ended as suddenly as it had begun. Kosa lay still, gasping for breath, his rage spent. Taza stood over him, bleeding but unbowed. This is my choice, Taza said, his voice carrying through the camp. I protect her not because she is white, but because she is innocent. Then he turned to Clara, his expression unreadable. You have endured me, he said quietly. Now I endure for you. The camp fell silent. Even the wind seemed to stop. Kosa pushed himself up slowly, eyes burning with humiliation. But he said no more. When the others drifted away, Clara went to Taza. You didn't have to do that, she said, her voice shaking. Yes, he said simply. I did. She took his wounded arm and tore a strip from her blanket, binding it tightly. The gesture was small, but it made him still. Their eyes met, closer now, raw. Under the pale desert moon, surrounded by silence and stars, Clara realized this man was no longer her captor. He was her choice, one she could neither explain nor undo. The dawn came dry and pitiless over the horizon, washing the desert in gold and fire. The night had been long, too long, and neither Elena nor Taza had spoken much since leaving the Apache camp. The wind whipped through the canyons like a ghost, and the silence between them carried more weight than any words could. Elena rode beside him, her body aching from exhaustion, but her heart was torn in a deeper way. She could still feel the memory of his hands, the way he'd held her when she trembled, the way he'd kissed her as though the world would end if he stopped. Now that same man rode in silence, face unreadable, as though he was preparing himself for something final. They were heading west, toward the river that marked the edge of Apache territory and the start of ranch land again. She had begged him to take her home to her father's land, and he had agreed. But with every mile, her heart grew heavier. When they stopped to water the horses, Elena finally found her voice. You're not coming with me, are you? Taza didn't answer immediately. He crouched by the stream, his reflection trembling in the rippling water. Your people would kill me before the sun set, he said finally, voice low, steady. And you would hate me for bringing more blood to your land. Elena knelt beside him. You think I care about blood? You think I care about land? Her voice cracked. I care about you. He turned his head, the intensity in his eyes like a storm barely held back. You care because you don't see what I've done. You see only the man who carried you, not the warrior who burned your father's barns, who took cattle and lives. Elena shook her head fiercely. No, I see all of it. And I still... She stopped herself. The words hung between them, raw and dangerous. He stood stepping back as if distance could protect him. You belong to a world that doesn't forgive mine, he said. Even if I could stay, the first bullet fired would find me. Her hands clenched around the edge of her shawl. So what, we could run. We could disappear. Taza's gaze softened. And live how? You don't belong in the mountains. You'd die in a week. The truth hurt because it was true. She wasn't built for that life, and not yet. But the thought of never seeing him again made her chest ache. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled something out. A necklace of woven leather, threaded with a single turquoise stone. My mother made this for her first son, he said, pressing it into her palm. It's a piece of our people, the sky and the stone. When you wear it, you'll remember that for a time an Apache warrior would have given his life for you. Her throat tightened. She wanted to say something, to beg him not to go, but when she opened her mouth, no sound came. Taza mounted his horse. Your father's men will find you by nightfall. Follow the river. It'll lead you home, and then, without another word, he rode off toward the mountains, the sun catching the bronze of his skin, the wind tangling through his hair. Elena stood by the riverbank long after he disappeared, holding the turquoise necklace to her heart. For the first time in her life, she felt both free and broken, like the desert itself had claimed a piece of her that would never return. And somewhere far away, an Apache warrior whispered her name to the wind. The sun was sinking low when Elena saw the fences again, long silver lines cutting through the pale dust of home. The familiar hills of her father's ranch rose against the horizon, and yet she felt like a stranger riding into another life. The sound of the windmill creaking in the evening air, the smell of horses, the glow of lanterns. Everything was the same, and yet nothing was. When the ranch hands saw her, they cried out in disbelief. Within minutes, word spread like wildfire. The boss's daughter had come back. Men ran from the barns, women from the cookhouse, all staring at her like a ghost. Then her father appeared, Charles Hartman, the ranch chief, broad and graying, with a presence that filled the yard. He stopped dead when he saw her, his expression a battle between relief and fury. "Elena," he rasped, striding forward and pulling her down from her horse. His arms wrapped around her roughly, but his voice trembled. "God above, I thought you were gone." Tears burned her eyes as she clung to him. "I thought I was too." He pulled back, eyes searching her face. "Where were you? Did they hurt you?" Elena hesitated. Her lips parted, but the words tangled in her throat. "Did they hurt you?" How could she explain that she had been saved, not harmed? That she had found something sacred in the midst of everything her father despised? I was taken by the Apaches," she said finally, voice soft. "But one of them protected me. He got me out alive." Her father stiffened. "Protected you?" he repeated, incredulous. "You're telling me one of those devils spared you?" Elena's gaze dropped. "Yes." Charles's expression hardened into something cold and dangerous. "What was his name?" "I'm not telling you," she said quietly. "Elena." His tone darkened the way it always did before a storm. "If one of them touched you, he didn't hurt me," she shouted, surprising them both. The entire yard fell silent. "He saved me. He treated me like I was worth saving when no one else could." Her father stared at her, shocked into silence. The ranch hand shifted awkwardly, not daring to speak. Charles exhaled harshly, stepping away. "You don't understand what you're saying. They're killers, thieves. You're confused, girl. You've been through hell." She swallowed hard, tears threatening again. "I understand exactly what I'm saying. You taught me that a man's worth is in what he does, not where he's from. He risked his life for mine." Her father's jaw clenched. "If he comes near this land, I'll have his scalp." The words cut like a knife. Elena turned away, staring toward the desert. The fading light painted the world in gold and rose, and she imagined Taza riding somewhere beyond that horizon. Unaware of the war, her father would gladly start to destroy him. That night, Elena sat alone in her room, the turquoise necklace glimmering faintly in the candlelight. She turned it over in her palm again and again, hearing Taza's voice in her memory. "When you wear it, you'll remember that for a time an Apache warrior would have given his life for you." Her heart ached. The safety of the ranch walls felt like a cage. Her family thought she had been rescued, but they didn't understand. She had left her heart behind in the desert. She rose, went to the window, and looked toward the dark horizon. Somewhere out there was a man her world forbade her to love, and she knew that if she ever wanted peace, she'd have to defy everything, even her father, to find him again. The nights on the ranch grew longer after Elena's return, filled with restless dreams of firelight, whispered words, and a touch that still haunted her skin. Each day she moved through her chores like a shadow, present but hollow. The other ranch hands spoke of her softly, as if she might shatter. Her father believed she was healing, but the truth was she was waiting for a sign. One came on the third week. A rider appeared on the ridge at dusk. Not a ranch hand, not a trader, but a lone figure cloaked in red dust. The guards raised their rifles and the yard erupted in shouts. But when Elena stepped out onto the porch and saw the dark stallion and the proud posture of the rider, her heart stopped. It was Taza. He didn't ride down into the yard. He waited on the hill, still as stone, the fading sun at his back. Every warning, every rule, every ounce of fear vanished from her mind. Before anyone could stop her, Elena ran for her horse. "Elena!" her father roared, but she didn't listen. She was already riding. hair streaming behind her, her skirts whipping in the wind, up toward the ridge where the Apache waited. When she reached him, she saw the sorrow in his eyes before he spoke. "You shouldn't have come," he said softly. "And you shouldn't have come here," she shot back, breathless. "They'll kill you," he smiled faintly. "I know," tears burned in her eyes. "Then why?" Taza dismounted, stepping closer until he stood just before her horse. "Because I couldn't stop thinking of you," he said. "The desert feels empty without your voice. I came to see if you were alive." Her heart broke and bloomed all at once. She slid from the saddle, her boots hitting the dry earth. "I'm alive because of you, but I'm not living without you." Behind them, voices echoed, shouts, the pounding of hooves. Her father's men were coming. Taza's gaze flicked toward the sound, then back to her. "They'll reach us soon. Go back. I'm not leaving you again." "Elena, no," she said fiercely, grabbing his hand. "I'd rather die beside you than live a lie behind those fences." For a heartbeat, they just stared at each other, the world holding its breath. Then, without hesitation, Taza pulled her close and kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate, wild, a vow sealed against the coming storm. The riders crested the ridge, rifles raised, her father at the front. "Taza," Charles shouted. "Let her go." Elena clung to Taza's arm. "Don't let them take me back," she whispered. Taza looked at her, eyes fierce and alive. "Then hold on." He swung onto his horse, pulling her up behind him. And before anyone could fire, they tore down the far side of the ridge and into the wild open desert. Bullets cracked through the air. The wind screamed around them. But Taza rode like the wind itself, fearless, unstoppable. When the sound of pursuit faded, they slowed near the canyon's edge, the stars rising above them. Elena pressed her forehead against his back, sobbing from the rush of it all. Taza turned, cupping her face in his hands. "If you come with me now, there's no going back," he warned. She met his gaze, steady and sure. "Then I won't look back." And under the vast Wild West sky, with the coyotes crying in the distance, they rode on. Not toward safety, but toward freedom. The ranch would remember her as the chief's daughter who vanished into the desert. But the wind would remember her differently, as the woman who loved an Apache. Warrior enough to risk everything and never turned back.